Hello everybody to the next tutorial of English 2602. So what I have done is I have created on my left a short Word document with the different elements that can be found on your tutorial 501 study guide pack, where they ask you to identify the type of genre, the topic, the audience, who's writing, the source, the context, the purpose, the tone, and the style. A little reminder from our previous tutorials that not all of these elements will work. It's very much dependent on the kind of genre that you're looking at. For any persuasive genres, all of these elements are relevant, are valid, and should be examined. For the fictional works, not all of them are relevant. So keep that in mind when you progress to the second section of the study module. So I want you to get a sense of how to start prepping for an essay. You can't just sit down and write it. You have the time to engage. The idea is to get a sense of what we're looking for, how we're looking for it, do it as quickly as we can, as detailed as we can, then start writing our essay. At the end of the year, if it's anything like it has been in the previous years, you will have anywhere between 2 hours and 4 hours to write 2 essays. There has been comment in the past that this is quite a short time. I promise you, if you actually understand, you know the limit of your content, how long your essays need to be, the detail that you need to give, how to analyze it, how to go about doing this, then you could actually write this, write one essay of about 2.5 pages in the space of an hour and a half. So you actually do have more than enough time to engage. So to give you a little bit of a explanation, this is what I've done to show you how we could possibly start thinking about our essay. Now, let me get rid of this actually. Not everything here is going to be predominantly in my introduction, but it gives you a sense of what I'm going to include either in my introduction, my body, and my conclusion. A reminder that my conclusion doesn't actually have any new information. It's a summary, and it draws my analysis to a close with perhaps a statement. Okay. Now, it asks me to identify the type of genre. Okay, and if I'm looking at my assessment 1 pack, it is a political persuasive text. I do need to actually include that. And in this case, it's an online blog. It's an opinion piece. It's from the Washington Post, which is an American newspaper organization that has editorials, it has news articles, it has opinion pieces. Okay, lots of people read it. It generally has kind of thoughtful political content, and one of the reasons why it's important to consider where it comes from is to consider the audience. Okay, but we'll get there. The topic. So if we go through, first and foremost, titles give us a good sense about what the text is about. Backyard beast, disfigure yards in ways we're only beginning to comprehend. The idea of beginning to comprehend suggests that this article is going to be talking about the consequences of how we are attempting to fix the problem of the lack of bees. And we're doing that by creating another problem. And so disfigure yards is quite an emotive statement. When something is disfigured, it oftentimes is linked to things being damaged, to things being turned into something that is unattractive, that we are harming, that we're doing irrevocable damage. So the title already has those elements of the problematic elements of introducing honeybees into ecosystems. And I can quickly brush through. The first thing you want to do always is skim through your passage, get a sense of the what, and be confident in it. So here we have the introduction. We know that it is the subjective content here. We know that it's specifically speaking about people in rural settings, not so much, urban settings, not so much rural settings. We know that our author is implying here in this paragraph that the reason why the honeybees are becoming problematic is because we're trying to minimize the idea that we're running out of honeybees. So everybody in New York, everyone got on the honeybee bandwagon and started creating their own honeybees. So we're already starting to get a sense, just from this short section, what this text is going to be about. Obviously, this is an entire passage. You often only get an extract, so of about 2 or 3 paragraphs long. But we can see already the native pollinators starting to disappear. We can see some research indicating that the urban hives have become unsustainable. So it's very clear just from the first couple of passages that the author is going to be talking about the damage of artificially creating beehives in a particular ecosystem. Then, of course, we have who is the audience. It's very clear the Washington Post is an American publication, so most of the author's audience is probably going to be from this area. Then we have the idea of the fact that it's online, which means that anybody worldwide can actually get it. But more specifically, in the passage itself, we have the idea of the urban setting. Emphasizing the American context is the reference to American cities, but also with Notre Dame linking in here, and then Montreal linking in here. We do have Switzerland, although they are that's a country, that's a city, and that's a particular place in the city. So we do have a sense that it's not just American-based. It does have a link to worldwide urbanization, and then that the problem is global as well. So it can be for both American and worldwide populations. So I need to look at those kinds of things when I am examining this idea. Who is writing it? Honestly speaking, if this were a speech, then I would be more focused on who was speaking. But really, this module wants you to look at close passage reading. It doesn't want you to go and do research on the writer, what their political beliefs are. What the module wants you to do is to identify what is being said now, what does it mean now, who does it affect now, what are the political opinions, biases, and messages being distributed now. Anything that you have to find from another source is actually not relevant. And when we mark it, when we see that you've gone and given me a whole biography about the author, about the speaker, about the topic, you're not going to pass this module. What I want to see is, can you break down this passage, find those bits and pieces, that idea the honeybees were a rarity, which suggests that people were beginning to be worried about them, which in turn has now caused this unforeseen consequence where we're starting to, and there's a lovely little simile that crops up somewhere here. Here we go. The honeybees are like gentrification. So they're like rich people waltzing into poor neighborhoods, buying out their condos and buying out their apartments and buying out their flats and their homes, and then turning them into places that only rich people can live in. Okay, so we have elements like this. So the intention here is, can you engage with this passage rather than can you talk about global warming, the destruction of bees? That I'm not interested in. I'm only interested in what you can pull from this passage. And that goes for all genres. Now, in terms of source, it's an online source. That source is only important because it tells me who the audience is, where I can access it. If the source is not online, if it's been taken from a newspaper clipping, it's a lot more local, a lot more difficult to get hold of worldwide, and therefore the audience is going to be more location bound than having it on the internet, which anyone can find. So that's really the only reason why we would have the source there. Context is important. Now, remember what I said, I don't want to see anything that is from outside this passage, but the idea of urbanization, the idea of the loss of bees, the idea of a desire to try and help in some way sustain a natural pollen cycle by creating these artificial beehives. That's the context that I found from this passage. It's not because I've gone looking anywhere else. It's literally what the passage has told me, what has happened. How did we get here? Remember here he says, for the most part of the century, honeybees are a rarity. Over the last 2 decades, we started to see a rise in urban beekeeping. Then we get a sense of that growth over here. Here's some more contextualization. In Montreal, in 2013, we went from 238 beehives to 3,000 in 2020. I'm not a stats person. If you're into math, you can rephrase that in terms of a ratio, but I'm pretty sure that that is a phenomenal growth. And then he says each hive can contain up to 80,000 insects. So can you imagine 3,000 times 80,000 insects? That is a huge amount of what is essentially invasive because it has been placed there by humans. Okay. Then we go on to purpose. So, of course, look at the language here. Urban hives have become unsustainable. Native pollinators are starting to disappear. There is not enough of a flowering plant for every hive on every corner. So we're starting to get a sense of danger here, of worry. There's a personal aspect here. We get the author's perspective on his own beekeeping experience, but really what we're starting to see is that because of the amount of people having home beehives, they're becoming swarm-like, right? Then we also look at how he describes the charismatic butterflies and dragonflies, the leggy wasps, the tiny hovering flies, and the fuzzy bumblebees. These are all cute and adorable and emotive. And the intention, of course, is to make us feel more charitable towards the other insects that we haven't actually considered as pollinators. rather than just the honeybees. So he's saying a diverse ecosystem is important, and we cannot forget that. So we continue, we can find other things. There's just not enough food to go round. We can see the native populations are being affected by the influx of urban bees. We see that simile that I pointed out earlier on. We can see honeybees are tucked all over the United States. So they're ubiquitous, meaning that you find them everywhere. But the native species play an important role in biodiversity, and the implication is that as we push honeybees into other environments, we are losing that biodiversity, which of course is more important than just having honeybees. And then we get that idea of the food source, not enough content going around, a struggling population. Again, that urbanization idea coming in with the overcrowding, the crowding increasing. These two phrases are there to bring forth a particular sense of anxiety and concern and worry. Let's see what else. So here again, we fall back onto that personal experience and our conclusion. The author's being very clever here. He's using his own perspective, implying that he failed at engaging in the honeybees because it's actually very difficult to maintain and to keep them, and you can't just keep on replacing them. That's unsustainable. But instead, what is sustainable, what is more effective, what is more important than trying to bring honeybees in, is to support the native wildlife and the native insect life in the area. Okay, so we have that. So that basically is a summary. And notice how I pulled out pieces of content. And those are the kinds of phrases and words I'm going to use as I analyze this passage, right? But that's my context, and that's my purpose. So he's trying to get the reader to consider their actions, their attempt, and it's good. It's like, oh, look, there's a problem. We don't have enough honeybees. Let's create some honeybee hives, and let's bring the population back up and running. That's good. But the population has to be maintained where honeybees are needed, rather than putting them everywhere and compromising the ecosystem and the biodiverse ecosystem that's needed. So he also then tries to get us to change our mind on how we engage with our surroundings. And if we want to be more eco-aware, then we also need to be more careful about how we react to certain deficits. We can't just automatically start planting things or start maintaining hives or start introducing something. What are the consequences? Is it something that is good for the area? Those kinds of things. So the tone overall, there is an element of matter of fact, especially when he's using his personal story. There's a sense of reflective contemplation there. When he brings in the studies, it's matter of fact, it's factual. He's trying to be very objective. There is a criticism. His attitude is critical, but it's not antagonistic. It's not dismissive. He is part of the people who have tried to help by creating these honeybee urban environments. And so he's not being critical of that in terms of hating. He's just recognizing the faults in it. Okay. So that's why I say matter of fact, because he's not being aggressive in his content. And then style. So style here is a little bit more tricky. We have our similes. Similes indicate that it's going to be informal, that the style is going to be subjective, therefore the register is going to be informal. We have our contractions, but they are rare and few between. Our author also likes to use dashes and bracket dashes quite often. And there are lots of personal pronouns. Here's a sentence beginning with but, always a good indicator that this is meant to be an informal passage. Also, the fact that it's titled Opinion gives us a sense that it's going to be informal. I have indicated here with formal elements, and that's because he does rely very heavily on studies, and the purpose there is to show that his response and his opinion here is balanced both on personal experience but also on research. So he's saying, you can trust me because I have been one of these people who have tried to engage, and this is what I found. But you can also trust me because I've done all of this research and I know what I'm talking about. Okay, so he's trying to get us to engage in both of those areas. Right. So now I'm going to pause this. Actually, I'm going to stop this. Then our next post, we're going to engage in how to analyze this, put all of this into an introduction, not all of it. So like, what would I put in the introduction? I would put my topic in the introduction. I would put my genre in the introduction. I would put my audience. I would indicate the source, but only linking it to audience. I would indicate who the author is when I indicate the title of the passage. I would not really engage in context. I would engage in context in my essay, in my body paragraphs. My purpose, I would engage that in my body paragraphs and then in my conclusion. My tone, I would engage in my body paragraphs and maybe my conclusion. And my style, I would definitely engage in my body paragraphs. So really, I would be looking at mostly this section over here for my introduction. And then I would be considering how I'm going to bring forth my various paragraphs. Okay, so this is where I'm going to leave off today. Hopefully it is effective, and we will continue in the next tutorial. So do remember that this is in prep for your assignment 1, which I can't remember if I indicated before. I can't go through that assignment. So this is my version of helping you to begin to identify the different aspects that you could potentially engage in, and how to use those aspects that you can find in your tutorial pack, in your essay, in your analysis. So I hope that you have found this helpful. And any questions, just ask them in your forum, and I will then start including them in, either I'll respond to them directly or I will include them in my tutorials. Thank you very much and have a very good evening.